Hola, hola. Welcome everybody to Season 3 of the Chicago Techies Podcast, a podcast focused on highlighting the voices of Chicago Techies and their experiences. This season, we'll be hearing from seasoned entrepreneurs to rising stars making their mark. We'll dive into their triumphs, their challenges, and all their unique experiences that have shaped their journeys. I'm Ceci Fischer-Benitez. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Ryan. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of the Chicago Techies Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on here. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. I'm excited that you decided to come on. I actually, usually start asking guests to share their name, their pronouns, where they're from, and your current role.
Perfect. My name is Ryan Lafler. Originally from Arizona, but moved to Chicago in 2003. And I've been involved in the tech business for the first 6 years of my career, working in the private industry, and then for the remainder as an entrepreneur in the tech space.
That's awesome. I like to go back usually to also your early childhood. I like to ask everybody about themselves when they were growing up in the early years, pre-high school or in high school. Revert back to what did you think you wanted to do back then? Like, what did you think you would become when you grew up?
I always had an active interest in technology in general. My father was a captain in the Air Force, so he was actually a navigator on a B-52 bomber. So I was always interested in defense in general, and I knew that somehow my career would parallel that. In a technical way, right? So I definitely had an interest in computers and computer science in general, and decided to pursue an engineering track there. My dad was always curious as to why I had computers and things like that in my room, and at the time it was it was right around the .com boom as I was graduating high school, and so. There was a general feeling of just not really knowing where the technology in general was going to go, right? That was like the birth of the internet that was taking place. And so it was really hard to say, in general, at the time, the appliance, a computer was an appliance that kind of only the rich could afford. And we weren't rich. We were a working class family. And so I would go get parts that were donated, and I would work on piecing them together. And then that led to local area networks, and everybody kind of knows where that went with the internet. So at an early age, I was kind of piecing local networks together and understanding how they worked. And that really helped my knowledge set going into my career, to eventually into telecommunications, and then this is more what we're doing lately is the quantum communications side.
Yeah, I'm excited to touch on that more. But first, I always had this like huge admiration for curious people that like to put together things and put them bring them together, take them apart, and just I could never imagine myself doing that when I was young. I also grew up in Mexico, in a very rural area. Where I was there till I was in 8th grade. So we didn't really, I didn't even know what a computer was till I came here to 8th grade. So, growing up, seeing just, I'm assuming that's for people that are seeing all this technology that there would be a lot of curiosity. And if I was raised in a different place, I think I would have also be wanting to pursue these new technologies and learn and take them apart and put them back together and whatnot. So
absolutely.
No.
And it's such a difference just generationally, because I feel like the latest generations they're born integrating to this technology right away. Whereas, our generation kind of had a soft ramp into that. We saw what the world was like before these general technologies were adopted. And now we see what the world is like, with technology being a very, very integral part of our life. And, these computers that sat on desks in the late 90s are vastly inferior to the cell phones that are in the hands of the younger generations that are coming into the market today. And the impacts that has, on our daily lives, the tools that we have access to, the knowledge base that we have access to, being ever connected, not even just on social media, but from a business standpoint. And then that going wireless and no longer tethering us is it's had very, very interesting implications.
For sure. I mean, I can't even imagine. So I have 2-year-old twins. I can't even imagine the type of technology we'll have once they turn 21. Because I mean, I vividly remember having 2 desktop computers in my 8th grade classroom, and we all had to take turns for it. And we had those floppy disks that you could only literally save one thing at a time or one picture. And now kids just have it so much better. They have like tablets in the classroom. They're learning from apps. It's wild. But kind of going back to that theme of like early career days, like what was your college experience like? Did you go in for computer science, or what did you?
I pursued an engineering track, so certifications were my interest. I started doing some weighted classes that were integrated with college courses on the formal education path. Actually, late in high school, I was an academic decathlon. But as I started to see the traditional path, there weren't a lot of things that aligned with me in formal education at all. So in the engineering tract, the Cisco and Juniper tract, and at the time there was a technology called Sonus that's now rebranded. I pursued engineering tracts in those technologies. My goal was to arm myself with knowledge to go out there and get hands-on, right? And to innovate and make an impact in the areas that I saw fit. And, just in formal education in general, and it's no knock, there's a lot of things courses you take that are not applicable to the tracks that you want to pursue. And, I am working with me, anybody that does, I'm all about efficiency. I want to focus on things that are relevant to me, right? And the engineering track was interesting because it was things that I could consume, right? And so, I early on in my career, I saw an advertisement in the communications sector when I moved to Chicago in 2003, and it was actually for Verizon, and it was for T1 systems, right? And I was on the wireless side of the business, and I saw the T1 systems, and I applied for engineering services and support role with Verizon. Wow. And actually was turned down because I didn't have tenure and I didn't have experience there. Yeah. And ended up going to work for a very small, medium-sized CLEC that was Chicago-based, local exchange carrier business, and it had just ended up having a front row seat into a very, very entrepreneurial experience. At the time when I joined the company, it was a $30 million company. And I had the opportunity to watch that same group of guys, and I was maybe employee number 60, grow that business to a $120 million company. And eventually that company got purchased. And, that's when I had my first experience saying, you have a lot more control over your destiny on the ownership side of the fence. And that's what kind of led me to an entrepreneurial background, is that I'd have the ability to control my own destiny, to influence things, and to just like the education path, pursue things that I thought were relevant to me, and that's kind of just put me in straight line to the entrepreneurial side.
Yeah, I mean, from what you said about yourself, like early on when you were a child, you had that entrepreneurial spirit of wanting to put together things apart and wanting to, and that's on your timeline. Being an entrepreneur is obviously, there's a lot of benefits to that, but also challenges. So on that topic, I'm curious, you said you also had your own company?
Yeah. So, right? I've been a part of a couple different companies on the ownership side. The first was a company called Facility IT Group, and it was me and one other partner, and we focused on critical infrastructures and communication systems, specifically geared towards the data center. And so we were an owner's rep for American Power Conversion in a company called Liebert at the time. And that was about a 4-year ride that we spent growing that business. And eventually it turned into another separate business that was entirely telecommunications focused. It was a company called Facility IT Telecom, and we shortened that and we called it Fit Telco. And we had about 120 customers in the Chicago and in Midwest areas, and it was purely consulting for technology companies. And then I ended up meeting up with another partner, and we chose to actually go in and take the business focus and turn it and transition it from focusing on just consulting services to actually becoming a full board tier 1 telecommunications company. And so with that, what we did is we focused on actually developing real infrastructure, not just on the consulting side, but to build real network. And that company was a company that we called COEO, COEO. And we eventually popped 39 states in the domestic United States. It was a Sonos and Juniper routing infrastructure. So we had a NOC with technicians. They're still located in Oak Brook today, right there on Butterfield Road. Yeah. And they still operate. I sold my interest in the business in 2019 to my partners there. And right around that time, got acquainted with Tom Dockich, who was building a purpose-built hyperscaler data center in the Northwest Indiana area. And he had a charter to get his data center interconnected with the Internet Exchange up at 350 Cermak. And for anybody that's outside of the industry, 350 Cermak, they basically call the heart of the Internet in the United States, and it's one of the largest internet exchanges in the world, really. So anything you do, if you have an iPhone in your hand or a computer on your desk, you're touching servers that are in 350 Cermak, whether you're aware of it or not. Even an internet search, you're touching 400 different servers across the United States in this thing that we call the cloud. And the data center is really it's the home of the internet. It's the cloud. And so without connectivity being completed from his data center and a fiber line communication system that would interconnect to 350 Cermak, we couldn't fill this data center that he built with telecommunications companies. And so really the concept was that if we could do that, then we would have more than just a powered shell in this hyperscaler data center that we constructed. And we would be able to bring some of the biggest technology companies in the world. We're still under NDA, so I can't disclose who those are, but
yeah.
kind of in the top 10 technology companies in the world, we were able to bring to that center and fill it. About 2 years in, we took on private equity, and we realized that there was an opportunity with the fiber line systems that we built to go ahead and build a separate company out of it. And that was the birth of the Quantum Corridor. And there was a grant that we applied for. It was a $4.5 million grant with the state of Indiana. And we started looking at next level optics equipment that we could bring and we could put onto the corridor. And so we applied for this grant and we won it. And that's where Tom and I took a full bound into the Quantum Corridor and said, this thing is something that could really be real. Mm-hmm. Around that time, we were talking to a company called Ciena, which is one of the leading optics companies in the world, multi-billion-dollar company, and a company called Converge One that's an integrator, also multi-billion-dollar company. And there was a white paper that we came across that was talking about the first quantum key distributions that were sent in North America in a lab environment. And we really realized that, number one, this is where everything's going. We talked about that a little bit, but as we were coming on to this podcast, mm-hmm. Huge implications for Department of Defense, huge implications for higher education and research, huge implications for private and public sectors and large technology companies. And quantum comms and quantum compute in general are going to change the face of civilization, really, just as much as the internet. We're seeing this as very much seeing this as an internet 2.0.
Yeah.
And so we're seeking with another technology company that I can't yet disclose to create what we're calling the first quantum internet in the Western Hemisphere. And so
and we'll touch that. Well, I'll ask a specific question about that. But for now, I mean, you as you're sharing your career path, to this role that you have now, I was like, yep, I definitely see all this expertise for this role. I can see how this career trajectory fits for you to be the president and CTO of the Quantum Corridor. So can you elaborate a little bit on your day-to-day operations and kind of what your responsibilities look like to make sure that you're contributing to the success of the company?
Sure. So as a founder and president, my role is to piece all the pieces of the puzzle together, right? So our staff comprises of engineers, our staff comprises of sales, our staff is comprised of folks that handle the grant side of the business, political side of the business, and in all aspects of technology. So my focus is making sure that everybody fits together in the organization, and we're going out and also it's interesting because people will use the term fearless leader. When you look at that, I wouldn't say it's fearless leader at all. I would say that as an owner and operator in the company, you have to look at everything. You have to be, I wouldn't call it fearful, but analytical, right? You have to look at market threats to the business. You have to look at market direction for the business. And so Elon Musk, for example, called it, like being an entrepreneur is kind of like looking into the abyss and eating glass, right? You're looking into the abyss because you see a vision that not a lot of people see. You believe in that vision, but then also you're eating glass because it's painful. you go through twists and turns that the business takes, and the risks and the consequences of failure are very real. And so you have to believe in yourself to a certain extent. You have to see ahead, and you have to lead people, and you have to empower your team and surround yourself with people that are better than you to help accomplish those objectives. And then as the chief technology officer of the company, my objective is to make sure integrations happen. So we're dealing with a myriad of different technology platforms in our company, and we have to make sure that those platforms have integration, right? And at the end of the day, come together in a cohesive way to move the company forward.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I feel like, from my experience working with founders, or even in my previous roles, having conversations with CTOs, even with the CEO, I feel that being able to communicate that vision is incredibly important, because you're all working together towards toward a goal. And if there's no alignment, that could come down really quick. And I've seen that happen. I've experienced it. I'm sure that it comes with a lot of challenges, being a leader as well. So what are some of the specific challenges that you've encountered in managing this pathway, this company, and what strategic design do you implement for this quantum corridor network?
Well, it's vision. Like there's market adoption, there's reacting, like your speed to react, your speed to be ahead of market, and your speed to react to market are really, really crucial to the business. So it's identifying, your pillars, like where do you see things going in general? So like a very specific example would be, we had to make a decision. Are we going to be a traditional communications company, or are we going to be a quantum communications company? And those are two very different things. Those are two distinctly different industries that we're supporting, that we're looking at. And this industry, quantum is tip of the spear in terms of technology in general. And it's really big with research and development and research and education, just because it's so new and the concepts are so new that there's a lot of areas that are unseen about where this technology in general is going to go. In that sense, but then also there's real ways that it adopts to things that we are doing now. For example, AI learning, right? For example, defense, because Department of the Defense is very much interested in post-quantum cryptography concepts for national security, right? And so then it moves to the second piece of that that I was talking about, which is reacting to the market. So we have to have vision in putting ourselves in the right place at the right time, but we also have to react to the rest of the people that are in this industry and the companies that are in this industry to be able to integrate and being able to be a collaborator also with the research institutions that are backing this and make sure that we're relevant, right? So it's a constant struggle to stay on top of your game from that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this type of technology is furthering advances everywhere in technology and has the potential to broaden this economic development in Indiana, in Illinois, just overall in the Midwest. There's a huge area of opportunity, and I think that's why. I'm not an expert here. I just learned about this stuff, but I see why the government is investing in this technology. I want to talk about this kind of innovation. So I did see some of the press around the quantum corridor that you all reached a certain milestone within the fiber network. So can you tell me a little bit more about that in testing? All the most secure fiber optic network in the hemisphere. So I'm in the Western Hemisphere. So can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the basis of our technology is a technology called reconfigurable line system coherent optics. And so it's a really fancy way of saying that we're pushing these optics, these lasers over fiber. So just to give you a brief history on communications in general and where the industry is going, everybody remembers the days of when you had modulated sound exchanging information. If you remember, your dial-up connections and your mom would come in and pick up the phone and you hear the frequencies. That was real information that's being exchanged. The problem with that is that it was not secure in a sense that even somebody could pick up the phone and hear the transmissions, and then you're going through every public switch telephone network, over all that switching infrastructure. And all that was vulnerable and susceptible to interception. And so the evolution of that moved eventually to what they called point-to-point systems or private line communication, where you would develop almost a dedicated technology path, whether it was fiber, glass, or copper, that would go from one point to another, and then you would exchange information in a dedicated fashion between point A and point Z. Right, and that's seen evolutions, as I've said. It moved from copper, where you were modulating sound, eventually to glass, where you were using light that travels faster than the speed of sound, to exchange that information with blinking lasers. Right, and so what our technology does, and the reason that it's different, is number one, we're following that same path, where we're creating these dedicated channels where at no point does our technology overlap with another customer's technology. When we create a dedicated instance of laser that's being shot over glass, it's literally not touching another dedicated customer instance, nor is it going over the public internet. So that's number one. Number two is that it is all American made. North American origin point made. Glass and optics and electronics. So everybody's familiar with kind of that Huawei breach that happened, and some of the leaks that even Sony Entertainment saw, in in 20, I think it was 2018, 2019. We can check that. But everybody's familiar with what those breaches kind of meant, and DDoS attacks and some of those things that were going on. Really gave way to what Chips and Science Act is strong on, and also a thing called TAA compliance that's used by the Department of Defense, that is all about a North American origin point of electronics to make sure that we don't have software breaches that are innate in some of these switches when they're programmed. So that's number two. And then number three is reconfigurable line system creates on wave servers these dedicated instances that they push what's called quantum key distribution, or QKD technology. And so you have entangled photons that are teleporting part of this information between point A and point Z in a very secure fashion. And then part of that is using this underlying technology that we create with optics to support and be the backbone and truthsome check for those transmissions. So it's a very, very secure proprietary way where we're enabling QKD on our network for research, defense, private and public sector.
Yeah, that's what kind of caught my eye. I didn't realize, that this technology positions Indiana and Chicago, the Midwest, to be a leading hub for quantum capabilities. Like they are able to create this secure connection opportunities, like you said, for corporate, for defense, for educational platforms across the state and literally the entire country. So that's a big deal. And I don't think regular people like me walking down the street know about this. So I make sure I wanted to ask about this, because it sounds like it's a great opportunity for even attracting investments and job opportunities for this area, for particularly in the fields of quantum research and development and commercialization. So I think there's definitely a lot of good things coming from this. So.
The implication, if we don't get on top of this as a nation, are huge. It's a national security issue, because he who unlocks this, he who cracks the code to quantum compute and quantum comms rules the world, right? And the implications are huge for the defense sector. I mean, if you envision, all the levels of encryption we have around national security, you almost have this technology arms race that's happening, right? I mean, every government, foreign interests, from Russians to the Chinese, Japanese, are really, really focusing on securing their systems from a quantum perspective, because quantum compute in general and quantum comms don't just achieve solving these algorithms through rapid trial and error.
Yeah.
One way through the maze at a time. Quantum compute and quantum comms explore every possibility instantaneously. And so you could have an algorithm that, would take, 21 years to unlocked in seconds with quantum compute and quantum communications. And so it's not just financial systems. It's not, we're talking about implications for national security, nuclear codes. Anything could be breached, and in a world where we're interconnected, that's the implications are things that we might not even be able to think about right now. And so there's a very, very real race. There's a lot of government money, as you had mentioned. There's a lot of grants out there this money's all being pushed to the development of this technology, so that we can maintain our superiority from a national defense perspective.
Yeah, and as you're speaking and sharing all this, part of my brain goes directly to, why is the government focusing on TikTok? Like, why are we talking about these things? Like, we have bigger things to worry about, but that's another story for another day. So I'm curious about if you're able to share, because I know you all probably operate under a lot of NDA agreements and whatnot, but if there are any innovating projects that you're currently working on as we plan for this future, of quantum computing.
I can talk about it in general. So the research institutions individually, I can't yet name.
Mm-hmm.
But what I can tell you is, right now we have 172 miles of dark fiber that's in place that links the heart of Chicago all the way to the Ohio state line. Number one. I can also tell you that we're interconnected from 350 Cermak, the heart of Chicago, across state line to a data center at 100 Digital Crossroad that where we have been able to send 40 terabits of bandwidth, which is almost unfathomable, right? Of bandwidth across state line. So, I mean, just to put that in perspective, you could transfer the entire Library of Congress, from an imaging perspective in 3 seconds, right? The latencies that we've achieved are 500 times faster than a blink of an eye for the transfer of this information. And what we're focused on is connecting all the major research institutions and engineering institutions along this corridor, and putting them onto our network. And then there's an initiative to build south for research institutions that go that are downstate in Indiana, and also other defense installations along that corridor as well. What we want to do is we want to create a higher education research corridor. We want to create a defense corridor. But then in addition to that, we also want to prop up commercialization of quantum, because there's so much focus and emphasis on research and development. Where the rubber meets the road is on the commercial aspect and the adoption of this technology in the market. So what we want to do is we want to create centers, commercialization centers along this corridor, where we can talk to real private and public sector companies that want to go in and create jobs and create opportunity and offer certifications, and also prop up research and broadcast stations so that these research institutions can go and these students can go work in these facilities along the corridor. And we can understand, where this is going, but we can also bring this out to the local communities for these next level concepts. You think about AI and autonomous vehicles, remote agriculture, education in general. Think about how dependent we were on technology during the pandemic. All the evolution of the market will depend on platforms like this, right? We're not talking about even us doing this video call over traditional communication systems. We're talking about modeling, hypersonics to AI learning, where you're sending huge chunks of information, and traditionally these research institutions would have to stop their supercompute clusters, literally pause them, because they'd have to transmit the information from point A to point Z. Imagine if these institutions were connected in real time and they didn't have to pause, and they could transmit all this information so that these clusters could connect. How much more efficient we would be in every vertical across every industry. That's the type of implications that this has.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're having this conversation, because I didn't mention this, but I'm also part of the Cook County Council on Digital Equity. So there is this code organization by the Office of President Preckwinkle, and we meet quarterly with other leaders, with other folks that are in telecommunications, that are in broadband, that are in schools. So there's definitely efforts in place to make sure that all this technology that's popping up, all this technology that we could leverage, all these things that are happening are also happening with an equity lens. So I love that there is a huge opportunity for students, for supporting students, for supporting people, for supporting job opportunities. So I think this is all, it's all connected, right? So I love that this is becoming something that we could leverage for like the betterment of the state of the Midwest. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it's an incredible opportunity. If you look at what happened with Silicon Valley, for example, like the first Pritzker talks about this. I mean, the first internet browser was a browser called Mosaic that we lost to Silicon Valley, because because the Midwest couldn't adopt and react fast enough. There's been many, many other technology companies that we've lost to Silicon Valley because we've cultivated these technology companies here, but we couldn't provide the resources to retain them, right?
Yeah.
And so if you look at quantum in general as a technology, we have incredible resources and we have incredible underutilized assets. Number one, we've got access to fresh water, right? Number two, we have incredible underutilized military assets that are in the Midwest. Number three, we're incredibly secure because these facilities are not on coastlines where they can easily be intercepted. Mm-hmm. Number four, we have incredible research institutions, a few of them that I won't name, that are highly focused on quantum, and they're receiving tons of grant money to foster this culture. And then lastly, we're not as susceptible to seismic activity like the coastline, the West Coast specifically, right? A lot of this quantum equipment is highly sensitive to calibration issues, and seismic activity can greatly affect the calibration of this equipment. And so we believe that we have a very, very ripe atmosphere to cultivate and create a Silicon Valley 2.0 in the Midwest here and revolutionize industry, especially across south side of Chicago and Northwest Indiana, where it's been kind of seen as that manufacturing industrial Rust Belt. We have a chance to go in and change the narrative and create a technology revival in these regions. And you're so right. I mean, when you talk about digital equity, you talk about workforce development. This is an opportunity to put technology in the hands of these communities, not to give them second best, not even to put them on par, but to give them something that's leading edge and to create a talent pool out here and single-handedly change lives. We're very, very excited about that.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see all the work that's coming, all the things that are happening. So, but to wrap up, I'm just, I normally ask a guest to share a piece of advice with anyone that's interested in joining your efforts, quantum computing, or even just if they're curious about telecommunications, like the industry, starting their own ventures, like what advice can you offer?
Well, first of all, hands-on, start doing what I did, start working on this technology as you can get a hold of it. Number two, take a look at the workforce development programs that are out there. I mean, a lot of these local colleges are starting to work on integration in the community and real job training, and income's not a barrier. There's grant programs that are out there that are absolutely fantastic that we could help to put you on a path where you could explore this and certification route. You do not have to have a formal education to get involved in this, but there's certification routes that you can go to plug in and be hands-on this technology. Follow your heart. Like, it's not about making money. Like if you pursue your passion, the money will follow. And even if it doesn't, you're probably still going to be happy.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that one. And now for anyone or any folks that might be interested in getting in touch with you, is there a way that they can reach you?
Absolutely. So we'll leave the contact info out there with Purpose Brands and make sure that funnels through the right channels and we can be put in contact, whether it's folks that are trying to get engaged from a career perspective, whether it's investment opportunity, and we'll set those conversations up.
Yeah, and I'll also can add if your LinkedIn, if you have one or anything, on the show notes. So happy to share all that information too on the episode itself. But anyway, thank you. This was a pleasure. It was a great conversation. I learned so much again in the last 30 minutes, right, that I ever did in college. Maybe not, but almost. Thank you again, and I hope that you have a good rest of your week. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I'm excited to keep in touch.
Right. Thanks for having me on the show here. It was a pleasure, and look forward to follow up in future discussions.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Great meeting.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Chicago Techies Podcast. If you enjoy listening, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review on iTunes. Let's continue the conversation on social media. We are at Chicago Techies on all social media platforms. Thank you again, and we'll see you next week.